Hey guys, Lucas Soccer here. Today I have a video on how to beat CRYSTRON. This is a series that I've been doing upon all of the meta decks that have been coming in and out of the meta scene. If you want to check them out, there should be a playlist that has all of these videos in them about all of the meta decks from recent times, from before Nats to now. I think this deck is one of the strongest decks going into the 2025 metagame, and I think that Vancouver has a very, very good chance to be won by this deck, so it's time to prepare now before the deck gets out of hand. I'm going to go over all the hand traps that are commonly played in decks, as well as things that we can play specifically to counter this deck. Let's go ahead and hop into it. Starting off here, Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom is a pretty mid card versus this deck just because it has so many pushes. One thing I've said in a lot of videos is that if you open Jokul plus Sulfidor while playing CRYSTRON K9, this deck is not losing to a single hand trap. There's not one hand trap in the game they can have that would really stop you. It's not like a ridiculous floodgate. So Ash Blossom is like a good card. And like you're definitely supposed to play it, but against this deck, the best points where you can Ash Blossom is if you have the ability to Ash Blossom on Sulfidor. That's a very good point. Just be aware that this deck does play Paradise Smasher, and so Ash Blossoming, if you don't have a way to stop Paradise Smasher, may not be the best thing. You may just be better off holding this until they've kind of filled up their field and they don't really have the ability to Paradise Smash you anywhere. This deck doesn't have a very good like Ash on your turn. Like a lot of decks like Malice have like a good spot where you can Ash them to kind of like stop a disruption. Like Draco Tail Ashing on a trap works as well. This deck doesn't have that, unfortunately. It only has the ability to Ash while they're doing their combo. Ashing on Sulfidor or Ashing on like a Chaotic Elements or a Case of K9, anything that would allow them to combo is going to be the best interaction for this card. Let's go over Purge as well, since these are kind of like the same cards anyways. Same thing goes for Purge. There's nothing that you can't like Purge that you can Ash in this deck. So you should probably just be purging like one of their first actions to try to keep them off of playing the game. It's a little bit more advantageous to purge into like their Case of K9 because it turns off more of their extenders. But at the same time, I think Purge is like generally just a bad card right now. I don't think you're supposed to play this card in Yummy even. Moving on, we have Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre is a little bit of a different card versus this because a lot of the times Ghost Ogre into this deck does absolutely nothing. You're really supposed to be using this in comparison and like combination with other hand traps. So something like Nib works very well with Ghost Ogre versus this deck. Because the one way that they really play around things like Nibiru is with Ripper. So if they use Ripper effect to search and you chain Ghost Ogre to the first effect, they're basically forced to use the Ripper to negate right then. They do get to set the quick play spell, but if you have a Nib in your hand, like you're going to be nibbing them for their entire existence, so it won't even matter at that point in time. But that's really the only point that you really have to Ghost Ogre this deck. There's not really another good point to do so. You can also like Ogre on your turn technically to be like a little bit protective with it. Ogring on the Lupus is really good when they go to use the effect to exceed because it's going to banish the card and you'll never have to deal with Lupus again, which is fantastic because I hate that guy. He's really annoying. You can technically do it on Nash Knight as well. Ogring on Nash Knight is like a decent interaction, but if you're going to let them get to Nash Knight, you might as well just Ogre on the Lupus and just take it out of play altogether. Then we have Bell. Bell kind of is like the same thing as Ghost Ogre. There's really not many other places that you can Bell versus this deck. One thing is like if they do start with their CRYSTRON engine, a lot of time they're having to start with Solfafnir. Using Bell on Solfafnir is really powerful because Solfafnir is like the weird card that lets them start the turn, but also like helps them extend very well. Being able to special summon back and then pop like a card that's not like a CRYSTRON card, like being able to pop Case to get your access to the quick play spell, or being able to pop an inclusion that you just have laying around to get another extender is really valuable for them. And so being able to Bell right then to stop the guy from kind of coming out is also a good point. If they do a line where they go for Elascelatus and they use Elascelatus to try to add back their trap, it should be pretty obvious because there's going to be a trap in their graveyard or banished or somewhere, you know. You can also Bell there. Being able to Bell kind of stops that interaction. As well as you can technically Bell on Cluster, because Cluster says you can target one face-up card on the field, shuffle one CRYSTRON card from your graveyard or banished into the deck, and if you do, destroy the targets. So if you want to hold the Bell for when they activate the Cluster, you can do it then as well. Something that you can't do with Ghost Ogre on Cluster, because a lot of the time when they use Cluster, they're going to flip it up and use the effect in the same chain link, and since the card wasn't previously face-up on the field, you can't activate Ghost Ogre in that one interaction. Then we can move on to things like Droll. Droll is very good versus this deck, but once again, this is like one of the best decks at tutoring out Paradise Smasher to punish you for interacting with them. But to be honest, if you have Droll plus another hand trap, like it is pretty raps for this deck. This is like the one card that really hurts this deck when like combined with another hand trap. Like even the Nib, they're getting to like a lot of different disruptions through the Nib. Like they're going to have Izuna plus the Cluster, and a lot of time they're going to have like the ability to like revive Tristaros on top of their board. So like Nib is good versus them, but Droll is going to stop them from even developing those resources. And so I think that Droll is probably better into this deck than Nib is. We already really talked about Nib. I'm just going to slide him over here. We can keep focusing on this Droll guy for a second. But Droll is really good when compared with other hand traps. You can also use like your other hand traps to keep them off of like their mid-range board. So Drolling them and then using something like an Ash Blossom to stop like an extender that would extend them any further is really good. And then we have our Mulch Armies. I think that Perulia is insane versus this deck. This is one deck where I think that Perulia actually outshines Fuwalos, and that's simply because of the Canine cards. If you Perulia this deck's best starter is Jokul, and so they're probably going to lead with their best starter still, even though it's going to give you one draw right off the bat. The thing is that if you Perulia them, they use their best starter. They now are trying to choose if they want to continue playing the game to get to like a good board with like a few disruptions, or if they want to try to like fully extend and Paradise Smasher you, or if they just want to try for the full board. Either way, if you are playing hand traps in your deck that you can combine with this Perulia, whether it's Azuna, Nib, Imperm, Ash Blossom, Ogre, Bell, any of these cards, like you are going to feel very comfortable as they're starting to play the game a little bit more. So that's something to definitely look out for. Then we have Fuwalos. Fuwalos is good. This is the card that I think is good into every deck of the format. Originally, when we were testing this format, I wasn't a big fan of this card because it felt like Yummy was the best deck as they had just like the best play around for it. But as people started to put like Droplet randomly into their deck and Imperms again, Fuwalos felt less and less impactful because you could use Fuwalos and then they would end on like a very like mediocre half board and then you could Imperm with it. But as we've like advanced more into the format, Fuwalos has felt more of like a turn-ending card. Being able to pair Fuwalos with any sort of interaction that they go for when they do the Paradise Smasher thing makes them feel like they ought to lose because they're going to give you like 3 draws to try to get to Paradise Smasher, and then you nib them on the Paradise Smasher, or you pair nib with another thing to get it through like a Ripper, even if they give you more draws. They are ending their turn right there, and the game is just done for. I think that one other thing to consider with Fuwalos is holding it for your turn. If they have like one of their weaker boards where they go for like a Tristaros in their field, like maybe a trap card and like an Azuna that they search, you can Fuwalos on your turn. It is something to be aware of. It's a little bit weird. One interaction you can do is if you have double Fuwalos for some reason and you couldn't use it on your opponent's turn, you can activate Fuwalos as kind of a bait. In most situations, they're going to chain their Tristaros there, and then you can chain another Fuwalos to them. So they'll special summon from deck, you'll get a draw there. They'll synchro summon, you'll get another draw there. And then whenever they do the like Azuna play, you'll get another draw. You actually get 2 draws off of that one because you'll have 2 Fuwalos in circulation by then. So you'll get 4 draws off of those 2 cards in that one like unique situation if it ever comes up. Droplet is another card that's really, really good versus this deck. This is a card that's probably going to get main decked in a lot of decks going forward. I can't see any future where Dark Ruler is really mained, even though it's kind of like the same thing as Droplet, just because it doesn't have any go first application, whereas Droplet really does. Droplet being able to stop the Azuna or like the Lupus push and just being able to like fully counter their inboard is like one unique factor that this card has that no other deck really has or no other card has. And then we have Imperm. Imperm is pretty low impact versus this deck, but at least you can pair it with certain things. Being able to like Imperm on the Sulfador and then just like hope that they have to go for like a weaker line to connect their engines, like go for the line with River Stormer to search for the Scrapper Cycler is something that's really important to try to cut off. So if you have double Imperm, being able to Imperm them there and then Imperm again is something that really halts them on their engine and stops them from really getting to the full combo. And then Impulse. Impulse doesn't have like a Fantastics point. If they do start with like activate Case of Canine or activate Inclusion, it does leave a card on their field. So when they activate the Jokul to try to special summon, you can Impulse them there. It's a lot of value if you can stop the Jokul from summoning the Sulfador. It's just like absolutely something they cannot play through. Let's look at some of the side deck cards and what actually makes this this matchup beatable. Starting off here, we have Shifter. This is not a card that every deck can play, but the decks that can play it should play it against this deck. Doesn't really have a play around to it. Even the Canine cards become like sort of mediocre. They lose access to Lupus special summon from graveyards. Like Azuna is not that good of an extender. Lantern loses a lot of value, and it's really hard to Paradise Smash them because a lot of the ones they're summoning from their hand are, you know, under the same Lightlock restriction. And so Shifter's really good versus this deck is cutting off both engines. Another card that I wanted to talk about here is Mega Fleet. One of the main boards for Canine CRYSTRON ends with SP Little Knight in the EMZ as well as a Cyber Dragon Infinity in the main monster zone. If you have the room to either side deck or even just main deck the Mega Fleet in your extra deck, being able to go standby phase, main phase, and take 2 of their major parts of the field, just throw them into the graveyard, summon a boss monster that's going to like help you break the board because he's not small. You know, he's like 2,400. That's enough to run over like any sort of like random boss monster they may be having on their field, as well as it or like the Ripper at least. Like you can go battle phase and force out the Ripper right there with just the Mega Fleet. If they do go for the board that ends with Ella Skeletus as well, then they're playing into like other things by doing that. But you can still use this Mega Fleet for other things. Like using this for an SP is definitely not bad. It's a fusion monster, so you're going to get the SP additional banish, as well as you can use this card in combination with things like Book of Eclipse or any other like non-engine that you're wanting to. Being able to out like their Omnigate and then instantly activate a card that like breaks the rest of their board is really, really powerful. And then I want to talk about Ultimate Slayer for a second. This is a card that I feel like has come into my testing circle a lot in the past week or so, just because it has such good diversity into the format. Being able to use this versus Yummy, sending something like a Malong, or using this card against Draco Tail, sending like a Garura, or even using it versus this deck or the Canine Vanquisher deck to send a Valon seems really, really good. Against this deck, you can send Valon targeting the Infinity to go ahead and put it back in the extra deck. And then the Valon can either target the CRYSTRON cluster if they don't chain it to the Ultimate Slayer. If they do chain it, you can still use the effect to pop the Canine Force Release. And if they decide to chain the Canine Force Release, they're basically giving up the Ripper to do so. So it's outing a pop from the Canine Force Release, the Ripper in most situations, and then it's also outing the Infinity with just one card. So it's really, really powerful, especially if you're playing something like Azuna in your deck, because then this card has multi-purpose to it, multi-uses, you know? And then we had Dark Ruler. Just talked about this card a second ago. I think Dark Ruler is better into this deck than it is into almost every deck in the format. This deck doesn't hold much in its reserves. It basically does its turn 1 combo, and that is its board. That is its game plan. We are hoping that we win the game off of that. If we do Dark Ruler them, then we have the ability to like break their board, whether it's by resolving a Zeus or just getting to the battle phase and being able to attack over everything, put all their monsters in the graveyard. The game is pretty much done. There is not much control they have at that point in time because they don't have that much of a grind game in the builds that are going around right now. And then one crazy card versus this deck is Gravekeeper's Inscription. This card is insane, not only at stopping this deck from comboing when you pass turns to them, but it's also insane at protecting your lines of play because it also turns off Azuna as like a hand trap for you. You use the first effect versus this deck that says neither player can activate cards or effects in the graveyard. Being able to use that turns off the Azuna Lupus line for a hand trap, but it also turns off their entire turn. Like there is nothing that they can really do to stop you from like just interrupting them anymore. They're not going to have any sort of CRYSTRON aspect to their deck. It's basically they're playing a pure Canine deck. And if playing a pure Canine deck with no Lupus in it just feels like kind of weak, kind of unwinnable, especially if you're doing a turn 1 combo while you're doing your stuff. And then we have 2 trap cards here. These are both thrust targets. Mutually Assured Destruction is one that's like pretty decent in this deck. It says both players must keep their hands revealed this turn. It means they can't activate Joko because it's already revealed. You can't pay the cost of something that's already being revealed. And then you also get to see their hand. So having perfect knowledge and knowing how to interact with them is really, really cool. And then the other trap card here that I have laid out is Different Dimension Ground. This card is like basically Shifter. We talked about Shifter just a second ago. I will say this deck, this card has like worse of an impact into the board, but it's still obviously like very, very good into them. If you do Different Dimension Ground them and you go first, they do still have the line of like detaching material, because if they detach a material, it technically isn't going to get banished under the effect of DDG or Different Dimension Ground. So they can go for something like Jokul, special summon any 5, use Jokul to add something like Lantern, make Ripper. Ripper is going to then add something like Izuna, and then you can attack, summon a Zeus using that Ripper, wipe the field, and then because these monsters were material and not monsters, you then have like Canine monsters in your graveyard, so you can activate the effect of Lantern to special summon back and kind of like build a board still. It is going to turn off all their CRYSTRON stuff. There's nothing they're going to be able to do as far as CRYSTRON plays, but it does get them somewhere, and it's something to definitely be aware of with this card. Even though it's going to mostly skip their turn, they do still have a line of play with it. That's going to be pretty much it for how to beat the CRYSTRON Canine deck. If you guys had any other questions for me, leave them in the comment section down below. As always, if you like this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, and I hope you guys have an absolutely fantastic day. Thanks. Bye-bye.